The Ohio River has lost 95% of its water in 24 hours. 5 million people now sit inside the impact zone. Cities across Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia depend on this river every hour of every day. Municipal intake pipes, power plant cooling systems, and shipping channels rely on a water level that no longer exists. Hydrologists are scrambling to verify readings while local utilities measure remaining reserves in hours, not weeks. Entire water treatment systems are designed for a river that suddenly vanished overnight, and the levels are still falling. U.S. Geological Survey gauges along the Ohio River now report water levels that have collapsed by as much as 94 to 96% in several monitoring stations within the past 24 hours. The station near Louisville, Kentucky, records a drop from approximately 27 feet to barely 1.6 feet in less than a day. Intake pipes that normally sit safely beneath the surface are now partially exposed. Several municipal water systems have switched to emergency conservation mode. The Cincinnati Metropolitan Sewer District confirms that its treatment facilities process nearly 140 million gallons of river water per day under normal conditions. Today that flow has slowed dramatically. Engineers report that intake pressure has fallen below operational thresholds. Water pumping stations are running at reduced capacity to prevent equipment damage. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has halted most commercial navigation on sections of the river. More than 70 barges carrying coal, grain, and petroleum products are currently stranded in shallow channels. Industrial cooling systems at multiple power plants are being closely monitored as water circulation becomes unstable. Meanwhile, state authorities in Ohio and Kentucky have announced a coordinated emergency water conservation order affecting nearly 4.9 million residents. The order has not yet taken effect. Local reservoirs are already being evaluated as emergency backups. What looks like a sudden natural collapse may not be natural at all. While headlines focus on drought and evaporation, internal water management records reveal something far more troubling: upstream industrial withdrawals and reservoir release decisions that dramatically altered the river's flow within hours. Several major locks and dam systems along the Ohio River operate under regulated discharge schedules controlled by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. In the past 48 hours, multiple upstream reservoirs quietly reduced release volumes. At the same time, federal records show that certain industrial users hold special water extraction permits that allow continuous withdrawals even during low-flow emergencies. These exemptions apply to chemical manufacturing plants, energy facilities, and large-scale processing operations along the river corridor. Environmental monitoring data also shows that several upstream tributaries feeding the Ohio River were already running at historically low levels before the collapse occurred. That warning never triggered an early public alert. And in the middle of it all sits a system that allowed millions of people to depend on a river whose flow could change overnight. The chain of decisions that led here did not begin yesterday. It began in 2012. That year, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers finalized a revised operational framework for the Ohio River Basin Lock and Dam System under the Ohio River Basin Water Control Manual Update. The change altered how upstream reservoirs coordinate releases during drought conditions. The goal was efficiency. Water managers gained more flexibility to store water for power generation, navigation control, and flood mitigation. But the revision also allowed temporary reductions in downstream flow if reservoir storage dropped below preset thresholds. In 2016, another shift occurred. The Ohio River Valley Water Sanitation Commission issued new industrial permitting guidelines that expanded allowable withdrawal limits for certain manufacturing and chemical facilities along the river corridor. Several large plants in West Virginia and eastern Ohio received expanded permits that allowed higher daily intake volumes during normal flow conditions. Warnings began appearing soon after. In 2018, hydrologists at the University of Cincinnati published a basin study showing that the Ohio River had entered a long-term trend of reduced base flow due to climate-driven rainfall variability and upstream water retention. Their report specifically warned that rapid discharge reductions could expose municipal intake infrastructure. In 2021, the National Weather Service issued another signal. Extended drought conditions across parts of Pennsylvania and West Virginia were already lowering feeder tributaries like the Monongahela and Allegheny rivers. Yet operational rules did not change. By early 2024, reservoir storage across several upstream control points had fallen to historically low levels. Managers quietly began reducing release volumes to preserve reservoir capacity. Each decision seemed small. Each adjustment appeared temporary. Together, they set the stage for a river system with almost no margin for shock. The structural cause sits inside the basin's management system itself. The Ohio River is not a free-flowing river. It is a controlled hydraulic corridor, governed by more than 20 locks and dams, dozens of reservoirs, and a patchwork of federal, state, and private extraction permits. Every adjustment upstream alters the flow downstream. When several adjustments happen at once, the effect multiplies. Hydrologist Dr. Amanda Keller of the University of Louisville reviewed the recent data and said this: "The Ohio River did not simply disappear overnight. What we are seeing is a cascading management failure where storage decisions, withdrawals, and drought conditions aligned in the worst possible way." Her statement points to a system built to maximize usage rather than preserve resilience. Water is constantly diverted, stored, released, and extracted based on economic demand. Power plants pull millions of gallons for cooling. Chemical facilities draw continuous intake for processing lines. Navigation locks regulate depth for barge traffic. Under stable conditions, the river absorbs this pressure. But when inflow drops even slightly, the system becomes fragile. According to basin monitoring data, the Ohio River typically carries around 281,000 cubic feet of water per second at Louisville during normal flow. The current measurements suggest sections of the river briefly fell below 14,000 cubic feet per second. That is not a small decline. It is the difference between a river supporting an entire region and one that can no longer sustain the demands placed upon it. Marcus Delaney stands on the cracked concrete platform of the Carrollton Water Treatment Plant in Kentucky, staring at the river that no longer reaches the intake pipes he has monitored for 19 years. He is 46 years old, broad-shouldered, with gray streaks cutting through his dark beard and a faded utility jacket soaked with river mist and sweat. Right now he grips a handheld depth meter, lowering its cable into water that barely covers the mudflats below. The device beeps. The reading flashes 1.4 feet. Marcus writes the number in a logbook already filled with emergency notes. Behind him, pumps hum unevenly as operators throttle pressure to keep the system alive. Trucks idle nearby with portable tanks waiting for orders. The river that once guaranteed his town's water supply now sits hundreds of feet away, exposing how fragile that promise always was. The consequences now radiate far beyond the riverbanks. Commercial shipping across the Ohio River system is already stalling. The river normally carries more than 180 million tons of cargo each year, including coal for power plants, grain from Midwestern farms, and petroleum products moving toward Gulf Coast refineries. With water levels collapsing, navigation channels that require at least 9 feet of depth are suddenly impassable. Towboats cannot move. Barges sit stranded in mud and sandbars. Every idle barge delays millions of dollars in freight. Energy systems are also exposed. Several coal-fired and natural gas power plants along the river rely on continuous river intake for cooling cycles. Reduced flow means warmer water and unstable cooling pressure. Operators are preparing contingency shutdown plans that could affect electricity generation across parts of Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky. Agriculture feels the shock next. Farmers across the Ohio River Valley depend on barge transport to ship corn and soybeans to export terminals. If shipments stall, grain storage fills rapidly and prices collapse at the farm gate. Economists estimate that a 2-week disruption could erase more than $450 million from regional agricultural revenue. Ecology is equally vulnerable. Sudden water loss exposes fish spawning grounds, traps aquatic species in shrinking pools, and concentrates pollutants that normally dilute across the river's volume. The Ohio River already carries runoff from more than 200,000 square miles of watershed. When the water disappears, contamination intensifies. The closest comparison comes from the 1988 Mississippi River drought, when barge traffic halted and shipping losses exceeded $1 billion. But the Ohio River supports nearly 30 million people across its basin, and the collapse is happening in real time. Dr. Kevin Reed, a hydrologist advising the Ohio River Basin Alliance, reviewed the flow data this morning and said this: "A drop of this magnitude in a single day is not a normal drought signal. Something in the system failed." His warning directly contradicts the early public statements suggesting routine seasonal fluctuation. Even the U.S. Geological Survey issued a rare advisory noting that several monitoring stations were recording historically anomalous flow conditions across the basin. Former Army Corps of Engineers water manager Thomas Larkin went further, saying this: "If municipal intake systems begin losing pressure, you are not looking at a temporary event. You are looking at structural vulnerability. This is no longer about one river. It is about the entire system that depends on it." The riverbank outside Cincinnati is silent tonight. Mud stretches where water once moved. The exposed riverbed glistens under floodlights, cracked and ribbed like dried clay. Barges lean at strange angles against the shallows. A stranded fish flaps weakly in a shrinking puddle while generators hum beside emergency pump rigs. Farther downstream, intake pipes that were once hidden beneath 20 feet of current now jut out into open air like abandoned scaffolding. The Ohio River is still moving, but barely. Across the basin, millions of people turn on their taps, unaware how close those systems are to failure. How long can the remaining flow hold? What happens if the next gauge reading drops again? And what else inside this river system is already breaking without warning? The Ohio River system was built on the assumption that the water would always be there. If the river can disappear this quickly, every city, industry, and community built around it now faces the same reality: dependence without control.